بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So today, inshallah, stories of the miserly. Last time we had spoken about miserliness, why that's a problem, why it's an issue, why is it that we engage in miserliness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that. Today it's actually going to be like really lighthearted. Some of the stories are pretty hilarious, but you guys will see. So the first story that he shares, he says, there was a man from Basra who was extremely miserly and had some of his neighbors invite him to a meal of tabahija and eggs. Tabahija is like a type of kofta, like in, I would assume it's beef, right? And eggs. So he overate and then drank water to where his stomach swelled to the point where he was in immense pain and he actually feared death for himself. Yeah, it's a lot of kofta, man. So when the pain became unbearable, it's kind of like us on Eid, right? So when the pain became unbearable and he began to constantly toss and turn, he went to a doctor. The doctor said that it's not a big deal. It's okay, it happens. Just induce vomiting and remove what you ate. Like get what you want out of your stomach, and it'll help you feel better, inshallah. He answered, "You want me to vomit tabahija and eggs?" Like he said, "I would rather die than throw it up." So right, he wasn't used to it. Is that what he wasn't used to throwing up? Right, he didn't want to waste it, right? Because remember, this is stories of the miserly, and miserliness, it's always associated with greed, right? And in this because look, he ate like crazy, right? He just kept eating it because it was like a unique meal. It's like when we go to Yemandi, and so you just keep eating, right? You keep eating, right? They stay with the. Oh, is that what it is? What is hashi? Yes, yeah. But in this situation, okay, what's going on in this story? What happened? What happened to our man from Basra? Right, he wanted to eat as much as he could. Why? Out of greed. Have any of us ever been in like similar or parallel situations? Right. Huh? Oh, when we go to Golden Corral. I'm sorry? Right. So there are a number of like buffets. This is a huge problem. Right, buffets. This is a huge problem. Like the all-you-can-eat buffet. Why? Because what's going on in our heads? Is it like because the quality of the food is so good? that was a quick no. Like when we pay, what are we constantly thinking in our heads? Right, we want our money's worth. We want our money's worth. So and when like restaurants that are buffets, obviously they understand how this works, and they have an idea of how much people are going to eat. Otherwise, if it wasn't a model that made money, all buffets would go out of business. So usually the only place where I've seen buffets don't open up is like near college campuses. It's usually not a successful model because college kids will overeat. But in general, like these places have this in mind, and like when we go into certain restaurants, like we'll keep eating. We'll keep eating, and many times we'll pass the point of hunger, right? It's not even like we're not even hungry anymore. What is that drive? What is pushing us to eat when we walk into that buffet? When we're eating that, when we're cooking that Korean barbecue, like what's going on? I'm sorry. Right, you don't want anyone else to get it. That's more of like a Black Friday thing, right? I remember like some of the uncles were asking me, is like, I don't understand, like they go and they camp out on Black Friday and do this, and they're like, why, just to save like a few dollars. I was like, it's not about saving the few dollars. It's like, what is it about? I was like, it's just a cultural experience, like just what I mean, just like being out there and like camping, and because what happens immediately that same evening or the next day? Huh? Well, regret if you don't get the TV, right? But like, for those that get the TV, what do they do? they start boasting, right? There's like this huge flex, like, yeah, man, like waited like 8 hours in line to save like $7 on that, the on the 4K TV. It's like, all right, that's great, man. I'm glad you got your TV, but like, so you have these situations where like we're pushed by greed, and I mean, alhamdulillah, it doesn't happen most of the time, but those situations where we are being pushed by greed, that is a moment for us to reflect. And that's the point here. Like, even though this is like a very lighthearted story that Imam Ghazali is sharing with us, there's a lesson that's definitely there. And that lesson is like, when you have an exaggerated story like this, why do authors share these exaggerations? Or why exaggerate at all? It's to drive a point home, right? Because it if you make it look normal, it doesn't come across as ridiculous. But when you exaggerate to this point where you have a guy who's like, no, I'd rather die than, I mean, like, I'm gonna hold on to this kofta, like nobody will ever, it's to make a point in how ridiculous we're actually acting when we have similar thoughts. Like, we don't even need to express some of these things, but when we're in that space and we're like, the second place I think it happens, and it's amazing, it's interesting how it always happens with food, right? And when you go to someone's house and the food is just banging, right? You know what I mean? Like, it just hits. What do you want to do? You just want to eat more. Is it going to change the taste? Like, so if I have like 5 morsels, or if I have like 3 plates, the food is going to, like, the taste is going to still be there. So is it going to take away from my experience if I have less? No. So what is it that's driving me? And part of it has to do with, like, not making sure like someone else doesn't get that. Sometimes you're looking at food and you don't want someone to have that particular cut of meat, right? Like, there's like a specific cut that looks really nice, and right, right, like it's like getting their spoon in there real quick, try to grab the food. If it's the menu, you just grab it. Yeah. Like the weirdest experience I had. This is when I was like first in Saudi, and there's this guy just like throwing pieces of meat at everyone. Like it's out of what do you call it? It's like out of karam, right? So it's out of generosity. What they'll do is, like, because you have this giant lamb like in the middle, they'll break the pieces of the meat and like to share it with you, to give it to you. And I'll be like, dude, it's okay, dude. Like, I could break my own meat. Like, I don't need someone else. It's like I know my cuts. Like, I can handle this. Actually, let me show you a thing or two, right? So there 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 are different ways that these things manifest, and that greed does come out. The idea behind stories such as these is to bring awareness to our own greed, to make sure that when those feelings do come in, that we exhibit a sense of self-control. The next one. A Bedouin turned and saw a man that had some figs, and then the man then covered them quickly with a shawl. So basically, you have these two guys that are facing each other, and as soon as the guy turned around, like, he had figs in his hand, so he was wearing a shawl, and he covered it up. So the guy said to the Bedouin, he's like, hey, is there any Quran that you know that you can recite for me? So he was like, yeah. He was like, وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَالطُّورِ سِينِينَ. So the guy's like, what happened to the teen? What happened to the figs? He's like, they're under your shawl. And again, like, you have like these ridiculous situations where this comes up. But again, the idea is to exaggerate this idea of greed, that he had these figs, but he didn't want to. He didn't want to share. And how many of us have had that feeling where, and especially if you have kids, right? So if you like bring home food, you bring home like a sandwich for yourself, and what happens? Like, they all jump on it, and like, it's like, I really wanted that sandwich, and that sense of greed and that want and that desire, it's strong, right? It's like a really strong thing. To the point where, like, some people, they might eat in their car, before they get into the house, with one tear, like, what happened? The 4. The steak, egg, and cheese from McDonald's. Oh, I was stunned. So, like, with the garlic butter, bro, it's fire. But anyway, so, like, you have these situations, like, and you have, like, where there are certain things that, like, we feel the sense of greed and we don't want to share with others, and sometimes it's situational, right? Sometimes it's situational. I I remember here when we had like an espresso machine, and it takes like for those of you that make coffee, it takes like anywhere from like 3 to 5 minutes to make like a cup of coffee for yourself. So what would happen is like I would make the coffee, and as soon as I would done, I would come out, and they'd be like, "Oh, Sheikh, like can I get some coffee?" I'd be like, "Yeah, sure," Like, and then you go back and like you're spending another like so something that should have taken like 5 minutes ends up taking like 20 because like four other people asked for a cup of coffee, and eventually you're like, man, I don't want to make any coffee anymore, man. Like I don't like I'm good. But those situations, like it's really telling of how quickly our heart attaches itself to things. It's something as like inanimate as coffee, right? Something that like we would normally think it doesn't have that much value. And sometimes things like we wouldn't even imagine our hearts are getting attached to. And it shows us like how fickle our hearts are and how quickly it can become attached to things. And if we have an awareness that our hearts will become attached to these things, it allows us to make sure that, okay, no, these are things that I'm actually never going to allow into the space. Like it helps me create that boundary. Because the problem is like when we lose things, our heart becomes distracted. And we have to make sure that whenever we deal with the world around us, that if we ever lose anything worldly, it shouldn't distract us, right? Like we should always stay on course. Our course is toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's toward gaining paradise, which is why important, like there's nothing wrong with having things, right? There's nothing wrong with like owning nice things. The problem is like the moment we lose them, we become distracted, and we might start saying and doing things that are out of character. And that might actually lead us to sin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. The next story. A man was invited, then not fed anything until the pangs of hunger became apparent, and he started becoming frustrated to the point where he was acting crazy. Like he started getting like really hangry. So the owner then grabbed an oud, like a type of guitar, right? So he grabbed it like to entertain him, and he said, "Well, what sounds would you like to hear? Like what music would you like to hear?" He's like, "I'd like to hear the sound of frying." So there's two levels to this, right? There's this greed where you don't feel like hosting someone. There's another problem here too, is that awareness, right? The sense of social awareness that we should have of each other. I remember I had invited some brothers over my house one time, and I had to go somewhere, and I was like, yeah, I have a busy day, I really have to go, and like I repeated it a few times, and then they just kept getting like more comfortable. So I eventually was like, hey man, you guys got to go, like you need to leave, like I got to leave. But and the thing is, like, I probably could have said it better in a nicer way, but like that social awareness is something that's really important. Like it has to be from both sides. That if we're in situations like where we can see someone starting to become uncomfortable, what should we do? Like make them feel more uncomfortable, right? So like no, but we need to have that social awareness. That's something that's really, really important, because we don't want others to feel uncomfortable. Because if someone else feels uncomfortable, that can actually be a type of oppression, right? Because we're actually hurting that person. It doesn't mean that I need to cater to everything about that person, because I don't know who that person is. But there are certain social guidelines that it's important for all of us to be aware of, that we all need to know. And there are certain social norms that are considered acceptable. And we had mentioned a little bit of this, like in the hadith class. Like, so for example, if I go to the grocery store and I'm buying apples, I'm like, no, you know what? I'm going to be socially conscious, and I lift up my thobe and I put the apples in here, and like I walk out with them, and like I go, I pay, I do everything. Did I do anything haram? No. How's it going to make other people feel? They're gonna look at it like, what's wrong with this guy? Like, why is he doing that? Right? Like, it's weird. It's awkward. And someone might be like, well, you shouldn't care what other people think. Should I or shouldn't I? I should. Why? Right? It's a reflection on me. It's a reflection on my religion. It's also a reflection on who? Are there people attached to me who didn't choose to be attached to me? Right? Family. So is it fair to them if I start doing all of these things that are considered strange or odd? I might be able to deal with the backlash, yes. But can my son deal with it? my wife, my mom, my sister, right? There are other people who are attached to me. And I think it's important for us to keep in mind, like, yes, I shouldn't let what other people think dictate my actions. I think that's something that's important. But I have to be at least what? Like, I have to be conscious and aware of it. That I don't live in a vacuum in society. There are other people who are attached to me. And because those people are attached to me, I need to make sure that I'm making conscious, positive efforts to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can. And again, those things shouldn't dictate to me, but I should definitely be aware of them. Yes? Like, what do you mean? Give me an example. Oh, entertain? Entertain people's doubts? No. So, okay. Like, so the thing is, like, if and that's actually a very no. It's actually, yeah. So so the question I have to ask, and this is actually a very good question. If people think something about me, and I find that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 people think something about me, am I acting normally? No. If that was the case, why? So are the 9 people crazy? So those 9 people are. So yes. So basically, you're saying those 9 people are crazy. In that setting, those 9 people are crazy. Interesting. So this is another point that's important to keep in mind. If there are 9 people who know me, and they all think something about me, is it possible they're all crazy? Yeah, for sure. And then when I go into other public settings, nobody says anything. What does that mean? So those people who don't say anything, you're probably just a stranger, just like anyone else. Has any of you stopped the people in the subway who are like acting crazy and be like, hey, listen, you're not acting normally? Huh? No? If somebody's wearing like mismatched clothing or like 2 different types of shoes, do I be like, hey, listen, were you aware that your shoes are not matching? Why don't we stop those people? We don't know them. Like, I'm saying, I don't know that person, and I don't know how that person is going to what? He's going to react or respond. So when people are, if I'm in a position where people are giving me feedback, they're giving me feedback because they trust my response isn't going to be what? Like aggressive, right? It's not going to be aggressive, or it's not going to be insulting. There are certain people who we don't deal with, not because we're afraid of them, because we don't want to be insulted. Like, and I'm sure we all know people like this, right? Like, we don't engage that person, not because like, or for any reason. It's like, no, he's just going to insult me. If I say something to him, he's just going to insult me. So it's better that I what? That I don't engage. Like, I would rather avoid this person. And we all have people like that in our lives. It's like, yo, this person is here, I'm just going to be like, yep, right around, right? You know what I mean? I'm going to scoot around, and I don't want to talk to this person. It's like, Assalamu alaikum. You know what I mean? Like, just keep my distance. And that's okay. That's fine. That's normal. But if I find in my life that everybody's trying to avoid me, what does that mean? That everybody's crazy, right? No. Huh? There's something wrong with me, right? There's something wrong with me, right? Sure. Yeah. I mean, this shows that there's a problem with me, right? If there's a commonality that I'm finding with other, like, the only thing that's connecting these 9 people or these 15 people is what? Is me. And if I am the common link, this is the purpose of a lot of these discussions, right? So when we talk about Tazkiyah, we have to understand, like, when the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Al-mu'min mira'atu mu'min, that the believer is the mirror to his brother. Why do I look in the mirror? Because I want to admire myself, right? No, I mean, like, why, in general, why do we look in the mirror? When I wake up in the morning, the first place I go to is I go and look in the mirror. Why? Right? Yeah, no, I want to make sure that, like, all of the blemishes, I want to do my best to lessen them, right? So I want to fix my hair, make sure, like, I don't have any drool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of work that we will do to make ourselves presentable. And it's the same thing. Like, so the other Muslims that are in my life, they're reflective of me, but they can be reflective of certain things. So if I have a friend that tells me I have something in my teeth, that person is actually my friend, right? He's being kind, even though he might necessarily not be nice, right? Kindness is important. I think this is a very fundamental value that we as Muslims need to have. The problem is like we live in a world where everybody's nice. Oh, I don't want him to get hurt. You know, what is he gonna? You know, what is he gonna think? Or like, oh man, what's gonna happen? And we've kind of like coddled each other. Yeah, really. Yeah, I'll try to speak to you guys to make you feel better. Like, but I'm saying like we've coddled each other. Like we refuse to actually engage with one another. We've refused to call each other out, and this is not a constructive society, huh? Okay, why do we do it on Twitter, huh? Because we can't say it to people's faces. Now, and I think that is one of the biggest problems with social media. I have no problem with people engaging on social media, but I usually put one condition: that you've actually met that person in real life. That's it. If you can meet that, because you know why? Now you have a mental image of that person and the things that I'm going to say, how they're going to react if I hurt them. The problem is right now, I'm looking at a screen and the screen doesn't react. It just flickers back at me at 60 hertz a second, right? Right, more than that? Depending on how good the screen is. But in those situations, it's like, well, I'm not actually interacting with someone. And it brings me a lack of social awareness, right? Like I'll start asking to do things that the person doesn't even want. So it's important to have that social awareness. Yes? Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is a good. This has to do a lot with how to advise people. So if there's someone who I know, if I advise him, I know that he's just going to get angry and it's going to get worse. What is my obligation? What should I do? Well, that's what I would do, but that's not the Islamic thing to do. So the question is if I know someone that is doing something wrong, but if I go and I tell him and advise him, it's just going to inflame the situation more. What should I do? I'm sorry? Okay, I can go ahead and continue and try to mediate. Or what else? Okay, I can try changing the way that I frame it. What else? I can have someone else like push them to talk to him, right? Yeah, I can wait, right? So do I have to communicate it? If after immediate, so the thing is, I think it's completely fine in every situation to communicate someone to something else, to someone else, if that is directly what? Impacting me, right? Because I have to draw my boundaries. Someone might be like, oh, he keeps calling me names. It's like, okay, go tell him to not call you names, right? Like this is a very, and I know I'm oversimplifying it, but sometimes we have such relationships where we have to actually go and tell the person like, hey, listen, don't do that to me. Or don't say that to me. Don't talk like that to me. But I have to draw my boundaries, because the moment I draw my boundaries, like if I don't draw my boundaries and the person keeps abusing me, and I never told that person don't abuse me, that doesn't make him right, but I'm also what? I'm also wrong. Why? Because I'm allowing it. Like and what do we call that? Huh? Allahu Akbar. Dang, yo, like that got dark real quick, huh? we call that enabling, right? It's actually what it is. We're enabling that person because we're not telling them no. But the moment we draw our boundary and the person goes past it, now he's knowingly passing that respect line. And I have a right to react at that point. Babe, if something's not directly affecting me. Example, you work in a facility or you work in an institution and you feel that X person is being underpaid. You have a good relationship with the boss. Should I go and advocate on behalf of that person? Huh? Only if you're woke? Should I go and advocate? They deserve it. Absolutely. Sure. I'm sorry? I should talk to the person. Does it make sense? Like here, can I advocate better for someone else for what they want? Can I tell on behalf of someone else how hungry they are? Or how ambitious they are? Right? Or how thirsty they are? Or how much like financial need they're in? Can I define that for someone else? No, I'm just honestly asking. In some cases, I can be like, yeah, this person is level 7 hungry. I'm just asking. I'm curious. I'm curious. I don't know. Is this person's level 8 taqwa? I need to intercede to bring his taqwa up. So what do they do? What is that person going to do? If I'm really bad at expressing how my abilities, what am I going to do? I'm going to wait for someone else to speak on my behalf, correct? Huh. Hmm. Sure. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Mm. So there's a difference for advocating, like attending something because somebody is not as well recognized, right? Or appreciated. There's a sense of self-awareness, but I'm talking about like in very specific cases. Here, when it comes to the case of, for example, salary, stepping in and advocating on behalf of someone else, it might increase the responsibilities of that person that that person wasn't looking for. It might create a rift in the relationship between the boss and that employee because they're like, well, why is he talking to you? How come he didn't come talk to me? Sometimes it's not even appreciated. I've advocated for hires in different positions. That person came in and they started abusing it. How does that reflect on me? The only time it's good to advocate on behalf of someone else is when they ask you to. Right? If someone requests from you, be like, man, listen, I don't, how do I frame this? And I've had situations like that too. It's like, hey, listen, I'm looking for a salary increase. What are, like, these are the things that I do. How do I translate that? Right? And I think that's a reasonable request. I can help you translate your skill set into why you deserve more because you might not have that ability to express it. But when did that come? That came when you approached and we asked for it. Unsolicited help is not always appreciated. It's not. Mm-hmm. So you always have a better advocate. Is it always going to be? Is it always appropriate? I think in every situation there's always a better advocate. There are some situations where they're not. Like, can someone advocate how much I love my kids better than I do? It's arguable. But there's a sense of like self-investment in certain things. And not just that. I think by relying on others to advocate on our behalf, it's not always representative of what that person is looking for. Because I'm going to start assuming a lot of things that that person wants or needs, and that they're not necessarily true. It was said that Muhammad ibn Ahya ibn Khalid ibn Burmak used to be extremely stingy. An acquaintance of his was asked about him to describe his table, to which he said, it was half of a half meal on a plate decorated with poppy. And I would imagine at the time, like, because poppy is like really cheap or something. He was asked, and who attended? He said the angels of record, so like Kiram and Katibin. So he said like no one eats with them. He said no, he has guests. They're flies. So that's the only other things that are there. He said that's terrible. You're a good friend and your garment has holes. Like, you're friends with this guy. This guy's extremely wealthy. He's clearly saving his money and your garments still have holes with it. He said, listen, I can't even borrow a needle from him. And he said, I swear by Allah, if Muhammad owned a home that spanned, Muhammad is this guy, right? He said, if he owned a home that spanned from Baghdad to Nuba, you guys know where Nuba is? Nuba is like in Egypt. So, like, it's a big house, right? He said if it had a house that spanned from Baghdad to Nuba that was full of needles, and Jibreel and Mikael came with Yaqub, the father of Yusuf alayhi salam, and Yaqub was asking him to borrow a needle so that he could sew up his son Yusuf's thobe. He said he wouldn't let him borrow it. Why? Because he's like he wouldn't have let them because of his greed. Like greed will take you to such extremes that you try to be so protective of the things that we own. So what can help change that mindset? Like, I need to protect this. This is mine. Okay, how do I do that? Spiritually, how do I do it? I'm just an agent, right? None of this stuff is mine. I'm just an agent. You're just an agent, you know? Like, yeah, like all we are is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given access to these things to use in the short amount of time that we live in this earth so that we could use it best for our akhirah. That's it. So we need to make sure that we are doing the best and understanding that I can't do anything with this wealth. This is not mine. And one day I'm going to die. What's going to happen with this? Right? It's going to be left behind. Nothing's going to follow me. I think this is the last one. Amish had a neighbor who would always invite him over his house and say, if you come over, I will provide crumbs and salt. And maybe he was joking. I don't know. And Amish would always ignore him, except one day he was actually hungry and he was like, you know what? Okay, I'll take you up on your offer. So the neighbor said, sure, come by. So Amish entered the home and was presented with crumbs and salt. And every time someone else was there, every time that person would ask for more, he would just make dua for him. He would say, Yani buraka fik, Yani may Allah bless you. And he said, then he asked for more, and he's like, buraka fik. And he asked the third time, he's like, buraka fik, Yani may Allah bless you. So the third time he said, get out before I get my stick and kick you out. And Amish said, woe to you. And he's speaking to the guest. He said, woe to you, I swear by Allah, I have not seen anyone more truthful in their invites than this guy. He invited me for so long, promising me crumbs and salt, and I swear by Allah that he did not provide anything more than that. So over here, it has to do with perspective too, yes? So while the man was stingy, did Amish blame him for his stinginess? Right, he appreciated his honesty. He said, hey, listen, he said, come over, and when I came, he fulfilled his promise and he invited me. And he told me that he would give me crumbs and salt, and he actually gave me crumbs and salt. So over here, like this person is fulfilling their Amish, their promise. The question then comes, it's like, why is this guy inviting people over and promising them crumbs and salt? Okay, so the question, why? Why do that? It's possible, right? Maybe that's all that person has, right? He could have been lying, right? He could have been trolling. What else? Maybe he knew that there was an Islamic obligation to invite people, but there's no obligation on how much you have to give them. Right, right, 4D chess. Is that a correct understanding? Sure, technically, but actually, no, right? That's not how you show generosity. Does anybody feel honored, like if they're given crumbs and salt? Would you feel honored if you came to someone's house and someone's like, here you go, sir, right? And you invite, it's like come over, I'll give you leftovers, right? This is worse than leftovers. This is Allah mustan. Allah mustan. So, but saying that, if this man, the advantage here, and I think one of the points of the story is that, hey, guess what? Even if what I disliked what the neighbor did, he defined his boundaries. He said, listen, I'm capable of doing this. I had a neighbor who I really appreciated this. So it's a big part of like Saudi culture that they would be like, tafadhal ma'na, like, come eat with us. And the thing is, most of the time they didn't really mean it. It was just done out of like, this cultural sense of generosity. When I first got there, I was like, man, like I'm getting invited out to dinner like every night. So they'd be like, "Tafadhal ma'na." I was like, "Hadir," like, "Oh shit, like let's go." It's like so I'd be eating dinner with like all these strangers, like constantly. And I'd be like, after some time, I was like, yeah, man, like, I keep getting invited out, and it's like, they're like, dude, they don't really mean it. And I was like, why do they say it then? He's like, it's just a cultural thing. I had one neighbor, and he would be like, "Tafaddal ma'na shay." He'd be like, "Why, come, we'll have tea together." And he meant it every time. He's like, he had no problem going out to drink tea any time of day or night, but he never intended to take me out for dinner. Except like I think we had dinner with him once or twice. But I appreciated that honesty more than a cultural misunderstanding where I put people in an uncomfortable position to take me out for dinner when they actually didn't mean to take me out to eat. I remember there was one person, like, I kind of disliked him, and he was like, "Tfaddal ma'ana." I was like, "Hadir, let's go." Like, and he was like, and I could tell he was like, like, he's like, "Yeah, I wasn't." I was like, "It's okay, khud rahtak ya akhi." I was like, "It's okay, take your time, I'll wait." Whenever you're ready to go. I was like, "Akid عندك مشغول," like, you're busy, and I understand, but it's okay, I'll wait for you. Like, أنا فاضي اليوم. I'm like, I'm free today anyway. It's like, I was looking forward to eat with you. It's like, so the thing is, like, it's important, again, like, these ideas of drawing boundaries. I think it's something that's really fundamental. Huh? No, he was forced to take me out to eat. So, like, like, huh? I didn't even reach for my wallet, bro. So, like, you have situations like where it's important for us to draw our boundaries and be honest with ourselves. And if there is something that I feel is being transgressed, if there's something that's happening, it's better for me to express that, because what happens when I don't? Hmm. When I don't share it, I start harboring malice, right? I start getting angry. And these, like, malice, rancor, envy, like, all of these negative, angry feelings and attitudes, they all have an effect on the heart. And when we hold these things in our heart, they will channel and they'll come out in ways that, like, normally we wouldn't, huh? Like, sometimes we'll explode, right? If, like, we keep suppressing them, they'll explode. But there are a lot of situations, there are a lot of different expressions for these things, and many times they'll be very inappropriate. Either they'll be inappropriate in the way that we say them, or it'll be with an inappropriate audience. Like, many times what happens doesn't warrant the extent of the reaction. And the reason for that is because of the heaviness that we have in our hearts. And the purpose of this is, like, this is why we study these things, because the goal is to lighten our hearts, right? To remove those negative aspects, to remove those feelings. A mu'min is not one who walks around angry. A mu'min is not one that walks around upset. A mu'min is one who walks around content and happy. Like, are there situations, like, where we have lows? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's normal. I think that's healthy, right? It's not possible for someone to always be in a state of, like, melancholy, like, they're on medication, right? That's not normal. We have our ups and downs. We have our dips. And I think that's important. It's just a matter of recognizing the trajectory, right? So if my trajectory is like this, then I need to do something. I need to fix it. But if overall I find myself improving, then I'm on the right path and I'm doing the right things. But a big part of that, like I said, from these stories, and these are very lighthearted stories, right? They're actually pretty funny. Some of the things, like drawing boundaries, it's important. Having realistic expectations from ourselves and others. That's something that's really important. Having the right mindset. These things are really important. And these are really important discussions to have, and it's unfortunate we don't have them enough. And it's unfortunate that we're not truthful enough with ourselves. That lack of honesty with ourselves, it prevents us from being as good as we can be. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. Any questions? Any points of discussion? Anything you'd like me to expand on? We have a little bit of time. Yes. As far as I'm aware, that's more of a cultural thing. Like, is it important to be generous? Like, is it important to keep others in mind? Yes. It also comes across as strange, right? And I'm sure some of us have been in situations where, you're sitting down to eat, and the person in front of you is like, "Yeah, man, I'm like, my bad, I'm really hungry," and they'll just, like, down the whole sandwich. It's like, bro, at least, like, fake offer, you know what I mean? Like, but it's like, it's not, the whole sandwich, really? Like, you that hungry? And then, oh man, that was great. Like it just kind of like rubs it in further. But yeah, I don't think it's enough. Yes. So, like in the Hijaz region, which is basically like Western Saudi, they meet like this, right? So they'll sometimes they'll even right like they'll even like do like a kissing thing. In the Eastern region, it gets worse. So don't worry. Uh, so in the Eastern region, they actually do this. No, 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 nose to nose, bro. Yeah, yeah. No, no. It's so for me, I was like, yo, this is kind of sus. Like, you know what I mean? Like you, yeah, it's like I was like, they do this thing. So the brother he responds to me. He's like, well, you guys are worse. I was like, worse? How? Like I was like, bro, we don't do like that kissy female stuff, man. He's like, you guys touch chests, and I was like, yeah, and I was like, no, no, I was no. I mean, so things. It's an understanding of cultural personal space, right? Like what that actually entails. So for them, the face is not as invasive. For Americans, the face is like super invasive. Like when you get into someone's face, and for them, it's like no, man. Like this is weird. Like what I mean. Like touching chest is a weird part. So that it gave me like I was like, oh wow. Like what I mean. Like I had never really thought about it like that, but it did give me like a little bit of cultural insight, and I was like, All right, fine. You guys win this one. Like, yeah. So we'll stop there. And أخي, we're in a masjid, أخي. Come on, man. Right? Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. 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 No, like, well, it. No, I'm saying there's certain things that depend. Like during sports, guys like hit each other in the butt over here. Just like, huh? It depends. Like, so I'm saying like there's different cultural things that are done in different spaces, and it's important again, like that we don't like as long as there's nothing haram being done, man. Like, don't look at down at that stuff, man. Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Depends on who. All right. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك